He invited his poor ex-wife to his wedding, just to disgrace her in front of everyone. He thought she'd show up alone, humiliated, wearing a thrift store dress and begging for closure. But when that limousine pulled up, and she stepped out on the arm of a rich, elegant man, every jaw dropped. What no one saw coming? Her new husband has a secret of his own, one that could destroy the groom's reputation forever. As old wounds, hidden betrayals, and long-buried truths rise to the surface, one question shakes the room. Who's really getting the last word? When the past shows up richer, stronger, and ready for justice. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Lena's feet dragged as she climbed the cracked concrete steps to her front porch. The double shift at Murphy's Grocery had left her back aching and her hands raw from restocking the freezer section. She brushed a strand of silver-threaded brown hair from her face and fished for her keys in the worn leather purse that had seen better days, much like everything else in her life. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across her small yard, where determined dandelions pushed through despite her best efforts. The front porch light needed fixing again, another item for her ever-growing weekend to-do list. She paused at her mailbox, its rusty hinge protesting as she pulled it open. Bills, a grocery flyer, a reminder for her dental cleaning next month, and something else, something that didn't belong among the ordinary debris of her quiet life. A cream-colored envelope lay beneath the stack, catching the sunlight with an iridescent shimmer. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind she hadn't touched in years. Her name was written in elegant calligraphy across the front. "Well, that's certainly not the electric bill," she murmured, running her thumb across the embossed surface. Inside her modest two-bedroom home, Lena set her purse on the counter and kicked off her sensible shoes. The house was silent except for the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, a family heirloom that had survived her divorce when so much else hadn't. She filled the kettle and set it on the stove, her evening ritual unchanged for years. Tea, a simple dinner, perhaps a book before bed. The envelope waited on the counter like an uninvited guest. Lena tried to ignore it while she changed out of her work clothes into soft, faded sweatpants and her favorite blue cardigan. But her eyes kept returning to it, drawn by some force she couldn't name. Finally, cup of chamomile in hand, she sat at her small kitchen table beneath the window, where potted herbs thrived on the sill. The evening light streamed through the glass, warming her shoulders as she picked up the envelope. Her heartbeat quickened. Part of her already knew what lay inside, though her mind refused to acknowledge it. With careful fingers, she broke the gold wax seal and removed the card inside. The script danced across the page in gold lettering. "Mr. Clayton Carter and Miss Bella Montgomery request the honor of your presence at the celebration of their marriage." Lena's teacup clattered against its saucer. 15 years since the divorce, and still the sight of his name could hollow out her chest. She remembered how he'd left not with a bang, but with a casual cruelty that had been worse than anger. "You've served your purpose," he'd told her after 23 years of marriage. After she'd worked 2 jobs to put him through business school. After she'd endured lonely nights while he built his empire. She turned the invitation over. A handwritten note in a script she still recognized instantly. "Thought you'd want to see how things turned out for me. You're welcome to attend, should be quite the event. Clayton." The trembling started in her fingertips and spread up her arms. The invitation fluttered to the table as Lena pressed her palms flat against the worn wood to steady herself. Through her window, she could see her modest garden where she grew vegetables and the roses that gave her such joy. How different from the manicured grounds of Clayton's estate that she'd once called home. Her hands trembled, but something else stirred beneath the shock, a small flame of dignity that 15 years of hard work and quiet rebuilding had nurtured. Lena wrapped her weathered hands around the warm teacup, seeking comfort in its familiar weight. The invitation lay before her, its elegant script mocking the simplicity of her kitchen with its chipped countertops and second-hand appliances. Outside, twilight gathered, shadows deepening as night approached. 25 years ago, they'd started with nothing. A cramped studio apartment with peeling wallpaper. A mattress on the floor. Clayton's big dreams sketched on napkins at the diner where she'd waitress double shifts. She'd believed in those dreams as fiercely as he had. "We'll make it together," he'd promised, kissing her forehead while she soaked her swollen feet after 12-hour days. She'd packed his lunches while he networked, typed his proposals late into the night after her own work was done, hosted dinners for potential investors in their tiny apartment, transforming simple ingredients into meals that made people believe in Clayton's vision. "Look how far we've come," he'd whisper, squeezing her hand under the table. When the first real money came in, she'd insisted they reinvest rather than upgrade their lifestyle. When he needed someone to manage the office during those early years, she'd learned bookkeeping, scheduling, filing, whatever it took to save them from hiring help they couldn't afford. "Nobody believes in me like you do," he'd said. The business grew. Their little apartment became a condo, then the house. Clayton's suits got more expensive. Their circle of friends changed. Their dinner conversations shortened. His late nights became absences that stretched for days. Lena sipped her cooling tea, remembering the morning she'd found the divorce papers on the breakfast table. Clayton had stood by the window in one of those Italian suits she'd never felt comfortable buying for him, looking out at the garden she'd planted with her own hands. "You've served your purpose, Lena," he'd said without turning around. "You're too ordinary for where I'm headed now. 23 years of marriage, reduced to a transaction that had reached its conclusion. I gave you everything," she whispered to the empty kitchen, the words still raw after 15 years. She had no right to be surprised by the invitation. Clayton had always seen people as props in his personal theater. Of course he'd want her there, the discarded first wife in the audience, witnessing his glorious next chapter. One final chance to remind her of everything she'd lost. The phone's sharp ring cut through her thoughts. Lena grabbed it, grateful for the interruption. "I was just thinking about calling you," she said, recognizing the number. "That bad a day, huh?" Millie's warm voice filled the line. "What's wrong, honey? You sound like you've seen a ghost." "Close enough." Lena's fingers traced the edge of the invitation. "Clayton's getting remarried. He sent me an invitation." "He did what?" Millie's voice rose an octave. "That arrogant, self-absorbed, with a handwritten note," Lena continued, "saying I am welcome to attend, like he's doing me a favor. Please tell me you already threw it in the trash." Lena's silence stretched between them. "Lena Carter, don't you dare consider going to that wedding. That man humiliated you, tossed you aside like yesterday's newspaper after you built his entire life for him. I know, but no buts. He wants you there to feel superior, to show off his shiny new life and his young bride." Millie's voice softened. "He doesn't deserve one more minute of your time." Lena stared at the invitation, the gold lettering catching the last light of day. "Promise me you won't go," Millie pleaded. "Nothing good can come from reopening those wounds. Promise me, Lena." Morning light streamed through the windows of the Veterans Center as Lena arranged donated books on shelves. The simple act of organizing, of creating order from chaos, soothed her troubled mind. She'd hardly slept last night, Clayton's invitation haunting her dreams like an unwelcome ghost. "You've got magic hands, Lena," Mr. Peterson said from his wheelchair. The elderly veteran watched her transform the cluttered reading corner into an inviting space. "This place feels more like home every time you're here." Lena smiled, grateful for the distraction of meaningful work. "Books deserve respect, Mr. Peterson, just like people do." She moved methodically through the center, watering plants, wiping down tables, listening to veterans share stories of their youth. Here, her plain clothes and practical shoes were assets, not liabilities. Here, nobody cared about designer labels or social standing. "Coffee's ready," she announced, carrying a tray to the circle of men playing cards. Their faces brightened at her approach. These men had fought in jungles and deserts, witnessed horrors she couldn't imagine. Yet they treated her with a gentle respect Clayton had forgotten, somewhere between his first and fifth million. "You're an angel, Lena," Frank said, taking a steaming mug with hands that never quite stopped trembling. "Just a volunteer," she corrected, but the warmth in her chest expanded. By noon, she'd helped serve lunch, listened to a Vietnam vet talk about his grandchildren, and read aloud to a group whose eyesight was failing faster than their minds. Each small act of service washed away another layer of shame Clayton had left behind. During her break, Lena sat alone in the small courtyard, watching birds splash in the birdbath she'd installed last summer. The invitation had followed her here, not physically but in her thoughts. Why couldn't she simply throw it away and move on? Because running and hiding had never been her way. Because dignity wasn't something Clayton could take from her, only something she could surrender. That evening, Lena stirred a pot of vegetable soup as Millie perched on a kitchen stool, still campaigning against the wedding. "He's counting on you showing up looking small and defeated," Millie insisted. "Probably told all his fancy friends his ex-wife is coming so they can gawk at you." Lena turned down the heat on the stove and faced her friend. "You're probably right." "Then why do I hear a but coming?" Millie narrowed her eyes. "Because I'm going." Lena's voice was quiet but firm. "Not to please him, not to make a scene, but because I refuse to hide. Lena, all day at the center, I watched men who faced real battles, who came home broken but found ways to live with dignity." She ladled soup into bowls with steady hands. I've spent 15 years avoiding Clayton, taking side streets so I won't run into him, ducking into stores when I see his friends. I'm done hiding. Millie accepted her bowl with a frustrated sigh. He'll think you still care. What Clayton thinks stopped mattering to me a long time ago. Lena sat across from her friend. I'm going because I need to face this last ghost. Hold my head high in the same room with him and feel nothing. Then I can truly move forward. Millie studied her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. All right, but I'm coming with you. I wouldn't have it any other way, Lena said, a small smile finally reaching her eyes. A week after her decision to attend Clayton's wedding, Lena struggled through the community center's back door, balancing 3 overstuffed donation boxes. The tower swayed precariously as she nudged the door open with her hip. Those look heavy. May I help you with that? The voice came from behind her, deep, warm, and tinged with genuine concern. Lena turned carefully, finding herself face to face with a tall man she'd noticed volunteering over the past few months, but hadn't properly met. I'd appreciate that, she admitted, relief washing over her as the stranger took the top 2 boxes. Thank you. My pleasure. His smile reached all the way to his eyes, kind eyes the color of warm coffee that crinkled at the corners. Silver-peppered his dark hair, and his face carried the distinguished lines of someone who'd lived a full life. I'm Jameson Grant. I usually help with the Thursday woodworking class. Lena Carter, I'm here most mornings. She led the way to the storage room. I've seen you around, but we haven't crossed paths much. Different schedules, Jameson nodded, setting the boxes down carefully. But I've heard your name. The veterans speak very highly of you. Lena felt a blush warming her cheeks. They're good men. They deserve more than society gives them. They worked side by side, unpacking donated clothes, books, and toiletries. Jameson moved with a quiet efficiency that matched her own. No wasted motions, no need to fill silence with empty words. These sweaters are perfect for winter, Lena remarked, folding a navy cardigan. Many of our veterans don't have proper cold weather clothes. Jameson nodded. My father was a veteran, Korean War. He never talked about it, but I saw how the memories followed him. He paused, his hands gentle with a threadbare jacket. That's why I started volunteering. To honor him? Partly. And partly because I needed purpose after. He hesitated. After I lost my wife. The simple acknowledgement of loss hung between them. Lena recognized the subtle markers of grief she saw them in her own mirror daily. Coffee? She offered when they finished. The break room isn't fancy, but we make a decent pot. Jameson's smile returned. I'd like that. In the empty break room, they sat across from each other at the small table. Sunlight streamed through dusty blinds, catching the silver in Jameson's hair. How long have you been volunteering here? He asked, wrapping his hands around the mug. Almost 15 years, Lena replied. After my divorce, I needed somewhere to belong, somewhere I could be useful. Divorce is its own kind of grief, Jameson observed quietly. No judgment colored his tone, just understanding. Lena found herself nodding. Yes, it is. My Elaine passed 10 years ago. Cancer. He looked into his coffee. Some days it feels like yesterday. I'm sorry. Thank you. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. What about you, if you don't mind my asking? Lena hesitated, then surprised herself by answering honestly. My husband found success, then found someone younger. The classic story. His loss, Jameson said simply. The words weren't delivered as flattery or pity, just a straightforward observation that made Lena's heart flutter unexpectedly. They talked easily about the center, about books they'd read, about the changing neighborhood. When Jameson laughed at something she said, Lena realized she was smiling, really smiling for the first time in days. As they gathered their empty mugs, their fingers brushed briefly. Lena felt a small spark, not dramatic like fireworks, but gentle and warm, like embers waiting patiently to be kindled into flame. Outside, early autumn painted the sky in watercolor hues of amber and gold, as Jameson walked beside Lena across the community center's small parking lot. Their shadows stretched long behind them, almost touching. My car's just over there. Lena pointed to a well-maintained but aging sedan. It's not much, but it gets me where I need to go. Reliable is better than flashy any day, Jameson replied with a nod of approval. My father taught me that about cars, people, and just about everything else. When they reached her car, Lena fumbled with her keys, suddenly aware of how comfortable their conversation had become. Something about Jameson's presence felt both new and familiar, like finding an old favorite book she'd forgotten she loved. Thank you again for your help with those boxes, she said, turning to face him. Jameson leaned lightly against the car. I'm glad I was there, actually. He hesitated, looking down briefly before meeting her eyes again. I've been meaning to introduce myself for weeks. You always seemed so focused on your work. I didn't want to intrude. You wouldn't have been intruding, Lena assured him. A gentle breeze ruffled Jameson's silver-streaked hair. He looked toward the horizon, his expression softening with memory. After Elaine died, I was lost. We'd planned our whole future together, travel, grandchildren, growing old on our porch swing. His voice remained steady, but Lena noticed how he unconsciously touched his empty ring finger. The cancer took her so quickly. 6 months from diagnosis, too. He shook his head. For the first year, I just went through the motions of living. I understand that feeling, Lena said softly. I know you do. Jameson's eyes met hers with quiet recognition. That's why I wanted to talk to you. There's something about the way you care for people here is genuine, but there's also healing in it for you, isn't there? Lena nodded, surprised by his perception. Helping others was the only thing that made sense when my life fell apart. When Clayton left, I lost not just my marriage, but my identity. I'd spent 30 years being his wife, building his business alongside him, making our house a home. What kind of business? Jameson asked. Construction. We started with nothing, just Clayton's toolbox and my grandmother's old sewing machine for making curtains and upholstery. Pride and pain mingled in her voice. By the time he left, Carter Construction had contracts all over the state. You built something meaningful together. I thought so. Lena sighed. Then one day, he decided he wanted something different. Someone different. Jameson nodded thoughtfully. Volunteering saved me too. Giving purpose to pain, it doesn't erase the hurt, but it transforms it into something that can help others. The parking lot had emptied, leaving them alone in the golden light of late afternoon. A comfortable silence settled between them. There's a fundraising dinner here on Friday, Jameson said suddenly, for the Veterans Winter Coat Drive. Would you like to attend together? Nothing formal, just 2 volunteers supporting a good cause. Lena felt a flutter of unexpected joy. I'd like that very much. 7 o'clock? I could pick you up. 7 is perfect, she smiled, opening her car door. It'll be nice to have something good to look forward to. As she drove away, Lena caught sight of Jameson in her rearview mirror, still standing where she'd left him, watching her go with a gentle smile that made her heart feel lighter than it had in years. Lena sat on the edge of her bed, turning Clayton's wedding invitation over in her hands. The embossed gold lettering caught the light from her bedside lamp, mocking her with its opulence. Tomorrow, after all these years, she would face him again. Her modest bedroom with its faded floral wallpaper and carefully mended curtains stood in stark contrast to the luxury displayed on the thick cardstock. The address alone spoke of wealth. The Grand Wellington Hotel, where rooms cost more per night than Lena earned in a week at the grocery store. She placed the invitation on her nightstand and smoothed the simple navy dress she'd laid out for tomorrow. Not new, but dignified. Like her. The phone rang, cutting through her thoughts. You still going through with this crazy plan? Millie's voice carried its usual blend of concern and bluntness. Hello to you too, Lena said, smiling despite herself. Don't hello me. I'm worried sick about you walking into that viper pit alone. Lena sighed, crossing to her window to look at the night sky. I need to do this, Millie, for me. Then let me drive you. I'll wait in the car if you want, but please don't go by yourself. I'll be fine. Lena traced a pattern on the cool glass. Besides, you'd never stay in the car. You'd march right in there and dump punch on Clayton's head. And he'd deserve every sticky drop. Lena laughed softly. That's exactly why I need to go alone. This isn't about revenge. It's about closing a door I've left open too long. At least let me help you get ready in the morning. I'd like that. After they hung up, Lena moved to her dresser and opened her jewelry box. Inside lay her mother's pearl earrings, simple, elegant, real. She'd wear these tomorrow, not to impress anyone, but to remind herself of who she was and where she came from. She thought about the weeks since receiving the invitation. The community fundraiser with Jameson had been lovely, comfortable in a way she hadn't expected. They'd met for coffee twice since then, and each time conversation flowed easily between them. There was a gentleness to him that soothed her spirit. She hadn't told him about the wedding. Why burden a new friendship with old pain? The sudden knock at her front door startled her. 9:30 was late for visitors in her quiet neighborhood. Lena switched on the porch light and peered through the peephole. Her heart skipped. She opened the door to find Jameson Grant standing on her porch, dressed in an impeccably tailored tuxedo. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his warm eyes held a mixture of determination and tenderness. Jameson? Her voice caught with surprise. What are you? I heard about the wedding, he said gently. From Millie. Millie, Lena repeated, making a mental note to have a serious talk with her well-meaning but meddlesome friend. Don't be upset with her. She's worried about you. He shifted slightly, looking suddenly uncertain. I know I should have called first, but... He took a breath. I don't want you to walk into that wedding alone tomorrow, Lena. The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. She gripped the doorframe, steadying herself. How did you know I was planning to go? Because I understand needing closure. His eyes held hers. And because the Lena Carter I've come to know these past few weeks is brave enough to face her past standing tall. She looked at him, this gentle man in his tuxedo, offering friendship when she needed it most, and felt something inside her begin to heal. Would you like to come in? She asked softly. Lena handed Jameson a cup of tea, her hand steadier than her heart. The soft glow from her living room lamp cast gentle shadows across his face as he sat on her faded couch. In his tuxedo, surrounded by her simple furnishings, he should have looked out of place. Instead, he seemed to belong. I've been meaning to tell you something, Jameson said, setting his cup down. I noticed you long before we spoke that day with the donation boxes. Lena's eyebrows raised. You did? 3 months ago, you were helping that young veteran, the one with the prosthetic arm. His voice softened. You spoke to him with such dignity, no pity, just respect. I watched how you made him laugh when everyone else treated him like he might break. Heat crept up Lena's neck. I didn't know anyone was watching. I've been watching ever since. Jameson leaned forward. The way you treat everyone with kindness. How you never speak ill of others even when they deserve it. Your quiet strength, Lena, it's rare. She looked down at her hands. No one had spoken to her like this in years. Clayton invited you to hurt you, he said, to parade his new life in front of you. Yes. The simple truth hung between them. Jameson took a deep breath. I have a proposal, and I know it sounds crazy. He met her eyes. I don't want you walking in there as the scorned ex-wife. I want you walking in as Mrs. Jameson Grant. Lena's teacup froze halfway to her lips. What? Marry me, tonight. The clock on her mantel ticked loudly in the silence that followed. That's Jameson, that's absurd. She set her cup down with a clatter. We barely know each other. I know enough. His voice remained calm, but his eyes burned with conviction. I know you deserve better than what Clayton did. I know you're the kind of woman I've been hoping to find again after losing Margaret. He moved to sit beside her, taking her hand in his. This isn't just about tomorrow. I've felt this connection growing between us these past weeks. Haven't you? Lena couldn't deny it. There had been something there, something warm and unexpected, blooming in the corners of her heart she thought had withered years ago. But marriage? That's sacred to me, Jameson. It's not a tool for revenge. Not revenge, justice. He squeezed her hand. And perhaps a beginning. She searched his face for any sign of deceit or pity. She found only sincerity and something that looked remarkably like affection. The courthouse is open for another hour, he said softly. Judge Williams is a friend. He'd do it, no questions asked. Lena stood and walked to her window, hugging herself. This is madness. Sometimes the maddest decisions are the truest ones. Jameson joined her by the window. I'm not Clayton. I won't make promises I can't keep. But I will promise you this. I'll stand by you tomorrow and every day after for as long as you'll have me. The moonlight spilled through the glass, bathing them both in silver. In its glow, Lena saw not the past, but a possible future unexpected and frightening, yet somehow right. Yes, she whispered, hardly believing her own voice. Yes, I'll marry you, Jameson Grant. An hour later, in Judge Williams' chambers, with only a court clerk and a surprised janitor as witnesses, Lena placed her hand on Jameson's arm. As she repeated the ancient vows, something settled in her soul, not the closure she'd sought, but an opening to something new. Morning sunlight spilled across Lena's front porch as she closed her door, checking twice to make sure it was locked. She wore a simple blue dress, the nicest one she owned, with a matching cardigan. She'd spent the early hours in a daze, still scarcely believing what had happened last night. She was married. Again, the marriage certificate sat in her purse, the ink barely dry. She touched her bare ring finger, wondering if this spontaneous decision would become her greatest regret or an unexpected blessing. A sleek black limousine rounded the corner of her modest street, moving with quiet dignity past the row of humble homes. Her neighbor's curtains twitched as the vehicle purred to a stop at her curb. The driver stepped out, crisp in his uniform. Mrs. Grant. The name felt foreign on her ears. Lena nodded, clutching her purse tighter. The back door opened, and Jameson emerged. Unlike last night's formal tuxedo, he wore a tailored gray suit that brought out the silver in his hair. He looked distinguished, confident, and impossibly kind as he extended his hand. "Good morning, wife." His smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners with genuine warmth. Something fluttered in Lena's chest. "You didn't mention a limousine," she whispered as he guided her toward the car. "There are a few things about me you don't know yet." He helped her inside, where a small bouquet of white roses waited on the seat. "I thought you might like these." Lena touched the delicate petals. "They're beautiful." As the limousine pulled away from her neighborhood, Jameson reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small velvet box. "I know we did this backwards, but—" He opened it to reveal a simple platinum band with a modest diamond. "Every bride deserves a ring." Tears pricked at Lena's eyes. "Jameson, when did you—" "My late wife's mother gave it to me years ago. Margaret always wanted it to be worn, not stored away in darkness." His voice was gentle as he slipped it onto her finger. "We can choose another if you prefer." The ring caught the sunlight streaming through the window. "No," Lena said softly. "It's perfect." They rode in comfortable silence, the city gradually giving way to the manicured estates of Clayton's world, a world that had once been partly hers, before he decided she no longer fit into it. The limousine slowed as they approached an imposing stone mansion with flowering gardens and a fountain. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Elegantly dressed guests climbed the wide steps toward the entrance. "Are you ready?" Jameson asked, his hand warm over hers. Lena took a deep breath. "I think I am." The limousine stopped directly at the base of the steps. The driver opened their door, and Jameson stepped out first, buttoning his jacket with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to such surroundings. He reached back for Lena, who emerged into the sunlight with grace she hadn't felt in years. The diamond on her finger caught the light, sending prisms dancing across her dress. A hush fell over the arriving guests. Faces turned. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Clayton's cousin Elaine, who hadn't returned Lena's calls in years, nearly dropped her clutch. The Hendersons, who dined at Lena's table countless times when she and Clayton were building the business, stared openly. Jameson offered his arm, and Lena placed her hand in the crook of his elbow. Her back straightened, her chin lifted. For the first time in years, she felt neither shame nor fear. "Shall we?" Jameson murmured. Together, they climbed the steps toward the grand entrance, leaving a wake of whispers and wide eyes behind them. The grand ballroom glittered with expensive opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast diamond-like reflections across marble floors, while floral arrangements taller than small children adorned tables draped in silk. String musicians played softly in the corner, their melodies floating above the chatter of the wealthy and well-connected. Clayton Carter stood near the center of it all, a champagne flute in one hand, his other resting possessively on the waist of his young bride-to-be. At 49, he still cut an impressive figure in his tailored tuxedo, though the years had added thickness to his waist and hints of silver at his temples. His laugh carried across the room as he basked in the admiration of his circle. The double doors at the entrance swung open. Clayton's eyes flicked toward the movement, his practiced smile freezing in place as he registered who had arrived. Lena. And she wasn't alone. The smug satisfaction that had warmed him for weeks imagining his ex-wife arriving in her shabby clothes, seeing what she'd lost, vanished like morning dew under a harsh sun. Lena moved with quiet dignity on the arm of a distinguished silver-haired man in an impeccably tailored suit. A diamond ring glinted on her finger. The simple blue dress she wore somehow looked elegant rather than out of place amid the designer gowns. "Who invited them?" someone whispered nearby. Clayton's smile slipped. His fingers tightened around his champagne flute. Beside him, Bella Hastings looked up at her fiancé, noting the sudden tension in his jaw. "Clayton, is everything all right?" He didn't answer. His gaze remained locked on Lena and her companion as they made their way across the ballroom floor. People parted before them, conversations dying as guests turned to stare. "That's your ex-wife?" Bella asked softly, studying the woman with undisguised curiosity. At 27, Bella possessed the kind of beauty that turned head sleek dark hair, porcelain skin, and large expressive eyes currently filled with questions. Clayton finally recovered enough to force a laugh. "Yes, didn't expect her to actually show, or bring a date." The words came out brittle. Lena and her companion approached with measured steps. The older man's posture spoke of quiet confidence, his eyes alert and knowing as they landed on Clayton. "Congratulations on your upcoming nuptials," the silver-haired man said, his voice deep and pleasant. He extended his hand. "Jameson Grant." Clayton hesitated before accepting the handshake. "Clayton Carter." His eyes narrowed. Grant. Why do I know that name? We've moved in similar circles, though we've never formally met. Jameson's grip was firm, his smile never wavering. I'm afraid I once lost quite a bit when Carter Industries acquired the Westlake portfolio. Recognition flashed across Clayton's face. That was business, Clayton said tersely. Indeed it was. Jameson nodded, his tone conversational, yet somehow carrying to those nearby. 300 families lost their livelihoods that day. My brother was one of them. Clayton's face darkened. Lena stepped forward, her expression serene. Bella, you look beautiful. I wish you every happiness. Bella blinked, clearly surprised by the genuine warmth in Lena's voice. Thank you. It's nice to finally meet you. Jameson placed his hand gently on the small of Lena's back. I should mention, Clayton, that Lena and I were married yesterday evening. Rather spontaneous, I know, but when you find true devotion, why wait? Clayton's smugness shattered completely. His eyes darted between them, searching for signs of deception. I hope you don't mind that I've brought my husband, Lena added softly. Bella's eyes widened with interest as she looked between Clayton's thunderous expression and the quiet dignity of the couple before them. Lena sat at table 7, a calculated distance from the head table yet close enough to remain visible. The cream tablecloth felt smooth beneath her fingertips as she traced small circles on it, a habit that had always calmed her nerves. Jameson's steady presence beside her provided an anchor in this sea of memories and whispers. Isn't that the first Mrs. Carter? A woman in a sequined dress murmured to her companion at the neighboring table, her voice just loud enough to carry. I barely recognized her. I heard she was living in some run-down apartment on the east side, another replied with a theatrical whisper. Cleaning houses or something equally dreadful. Lena took a small sip of water, her face betraying nothing. These same women had once attended her dinner parties, had smiled and embraced her, had called themselves her friends. When Clayton had left, they'd evaporated from her life like morning fog. Are you all right? Jameson asked quietly, his hand covering hers. I'm fine, Lena replied with a genuine smile. They can't hurt me anymore. A tall woman with carefully highlighted hair approached their table, her diamond earrings catching the light. Margaret Thornhill, once Lena's tennis partner and confidant. Lena, darling. Margaret cooed, air-kissing near Lena's cheek. What a surprise to see you here. And with a husband. How quickly things happen. When it's right, you know it, Lena replied simply. Margaret's smile tightened. And what is it you do these days, Lena? We've all been so concerned. I work at Greenfield Market and volunteer at the Veterans Center. Nothing glamorous, but it feeds my soul. Margaret's eyebrows rose. How? Noble. Her gaze shifted to Jameson, naked curiosity in her eyes. And you, Mr. Grant? What line of business are you in? Investment management, Jameson answered pleasantly. Though these days, I focus primarily on my foundation for displaced workers. Margaret's expression flickered with recognition. Grant Foundation? The one that just donated the new wing to Memorial Hospital? Jameson nodded modestly. Healthcare should be accessible to all, don't you think? Margaret retreated quickly after that, and Lena squeezed Jameson's hand in silent gratitude. The whispers continued throughout dinner, but their tone gradually shifted. Curious glances became assessing looks. The Grant Foundation was well known in philanthropic circles, and Jameson's quiet dignity made mockery difficult. When he excused himself briefly to speak with an old colleague, 3 women immediately leaned toward Lena. You must tell us everything, one insisted. How did you meet? At the Veterans Center, Lena answered simply. Some connections arrive when you least expect them. Across the room, Lena caught Clayton watching her, his expression dark and unreadable. She met his gaze steadily before turning her attention back to her plate. As servers cleared the main course, Bella approached Lena's table. Up close, her youth was even more apparent, the smooth skin, the bright eyes that hadn't yet learned to hide their emotions. She wore her elegant cream gown like armor, but her fingers fidgeted with her bracelet. Mrs. Grant, Bella said softly, would you mind if I joined you for a moment? Please. Lena gestured to the empty chair beside her. Bella sat, her posture perfect but tension visible in her shoulders. I wanted to tell you, I admire your grace today. It can't be easy. Thank you, Lena replied. That's kind of you to say. Bella leaned closer, lowering her voice. I was hoping, would it be possible for us to speak privately? Perhaps later? There are some things I'd like to ask you. The vulnerability in the young woman's eyes stirred something protective in Lena's heart. Of course, she answered gently. Whenever you'd like. A gentle tap of silverware against crystal rang through the ballroom as the best man finished his speech. Laughter rippled across the room, the crowd warm with champagne and celebration. Jameson leaned close to Lena. I think I'll offer a toast. Lena's eyes widened. Are you sure that's wise? He squeezed her hand. Trust me. Jameson rose from his seat with the fluid confidence of a man accustomed to commanding attention. He lifted his champagne flute and moved toward the small stage where the microphone stood. Conversations hushed as heads turned to follow his progress. Ladies and gentlemen, Jameson's voice carried clearly across the room. I hope you'll indulge me for a moment. Clayton's head snapped up, his easy smile freezing in place. For those I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I'm Jameson Grant. I've known the groom for many years, though from a distance. He paused, his smile warm yet somehow solemn. And I've had the honor of recently marrying the remarkable Lena. A few awkward coughs punctuated the silence. I'd like to offer a toast, not just to new beginnings, but to endurance. Jameson's gaze swept the room. Life has a way of testing us all. Some are tested with loss. He touched his wedding band. Some with betrayal. The word hung in the air like crystal chimes. What defines us isn't the hand we're dealt, but how we play it. There's a dignity in standing tall when others expect you to crumble. There's strength in choosing kindness when bitterness would be easier. Lena sat perfectly still, her eyes never leaving Jameson. I've learned that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or properties. Jameson's voice softened. It's measured in how we treat those who can do nothing for us, in how we honor our promises when keeping them becomes difficult. An older woman dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. To those who maintain their integrity when no one is looking, Jameson raised his glass higher, who rebuild their lives brick by brick after devastation, who find the courage to face those who once cast them aside. Clayton's jaw tightened, the muscle twitching beneath his tanned skin. And to those about to embark on marriage, Jameson's eyes flickered briefly to Bella. May you remember that love without respect is like a house built on sand. The tide always comes. He lifted his glass in a final salute. To strength that doesn't need to announce itself. To dignity that speaks in whispers. And to love that endures long after the flowers have wilted. Silence blanketed the room for 3 heartbeats before scattered applause broke out, growing stronger as guests rose to their feet. Many faces turned toward Lena with new expressions: respect, curiosity, even shame. From her seat, Lena watched as Bella's fingers plucked nervously at the lace on her gown. The young bride's eyes darted between Clayton and Jameson, her painted smile faltering at the edges. Something troubled flashed across her face. Recognition, perhaps, or the first stirrings of doubt. Clayton remained seated while others stood, his knuckles white around his water glass. Beneath the table, his other hand balled into a fist, pressing hard against his thigh. His shoulders rose with a deep breath as he struggled to maintain his composure, but the vein pulsing at his temple betrayed his fury. As Jameson returned to their table, Lena reached for his hand. The silent message in his eyes told her everything. This wasn't about revenge, it was about truth finally finding its voice. The crystal chandelier cast soft shadows across the small sitting room adjacent to the main ballroom. Lena settled into a velvet armchair, smoothing her dress as she waited. The door opened with a gentle click, and Bella stepped inside, her wedding gown rustling softly as she moved. Thank you for meeting with me. Bella's voice carried the practiced poise of someone used to making good impressions, but beneath it trembled uncertainty. Lena smiled warmly. Of course. Bella eased herself onto the sofa across from Lena, careful not to wrinkle her gown. Her fingers fidgeted with the diamond bracelet on her wrist. Your husband's toast was thought-provoking. Jameson speaks from the heart. Lena folded her hands in her lap, sometimes too directly. Bella looked up, her carefully applied makeup not quite hiding the doubt in her eyes. I hope you don't mind me asking, but what was your marriage to Clayton like? The real version, not the one he tells at dinner parties. The question hung between them like delicate glass. Lena took a deep breath, weighing her words carefully. Clayton and I were young when we married. I worked 2 jobs so he could finish business school. Lena's eyes drifted to the window. I believed in him completely. His vision, his potential. He never mentioned you worked. There's much Clayton prefers not to remember. Lena's voice remained gentle. I gave up my own education. We lived in a tiny apartment where I typed his papers at night and planned strategies for his first company. Bella's brow furrowed. But he always says he built everything from scratch by himself. In a way, he did. He certainly believed he did. Lena met Bella's eyes directly. The first 10 years were good. Hard, but good. Then his company took off, and suddenly, we lived in different worlds. What happened? Success changed him. Or perhaps it just revealed who he truly was. Lena touched a simple silver necklace at her throat. The day his company went public, he bought a new house without telling me. 3 months later, he said I no longer fit into his life. Bella's perfectly manicured nails dug into the velvet cushion. Did he? Was there someone else? Several someones, but that wasn't why he left. Lena's eyes held no anger, only an old sadness. He left because I reminded him of the hungry, struggling man he'd been, the man who needed help. Clayton doesn't like needing anyone. He left you with nothing? A small settlement. Not enough for what I'd invested. Lena's smile held remarkable gentleness. But I rebuilt. Found work that matters to me. Found peace. You're not bitter. It wasn't a question, but a realization that seemed to startle Bella. Bitterness is a luxury I couldn't afford. It takes too much energy. Bella stood suddenly, pacing toward the window. Her reflection stared back at her young, beautiful, adorned with every luxury. He gets so angry sometimes. When things aren't perfect. Her voice had dropped to barely a whisper. He promised it would stop after the wedding. Lena didn't respond immediately, letting the truth of those words settle. Thank you for your honesty. Bella turned, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Everyone else just tells me how lucky I am. Lena stood but didn't approach. You deserve kindness, Bella. We all do. Bella nodded, composing herself with visible effort. I should get back. She moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. Thank you, Lena. The door closed softly behind her, leaving Lena alone with the echo of words she'd waited 15 years to speak. Clayton's manicured fingers clamped around Jameson's elbow, pulling him behind a towering ice sculpture of intertwined swans. The frozen birds glittered under the ballroom lights, their cold beauty at odds with the heat in Clayton's face. What's your angle here, Grant? Clayton hissed, champagne fumes punctuating his words. You show up with my ex-wife on your arm playing the gallant husband? Don't think I don't see through this little performance. Jameson gently but firmly removed Clayton's hand from his arm. There's no performance, Carter. Lena and I are married. Please. Clayton snorted, straightening his custom tuxedo jacket. You married her yesterday. What kind of fool do you take me for? The kind who doesn't recognize faces from his past. Jameson's voice remained level, but something cold entered his eyes. We've met before, though I doubt you'd remember. 10 years ago. The Atlantic Corp acquisition. Clayton's smirk faltered for just a moment. I've handled dozens of acquisitions. This one was special. You promised the board you'd preserve jobs after the merger. Jameson moved slightly closer, his height advantage subtle but present. 3 weeks later, you shuttered the Madison plant. 400 people lost their livelihoods overnight. A flash of recognition crossed Clayton's face, quickly replaced by practiced indifference. Business decisions, nothing personal. My brother worked at that plant for 22 years. Jameson's calm never wavered, making his words all the more devastating. He believed your promises about job security, took out a second mortgage on his house the month before the closure, lost everything within a year. Clayton's eyes narrowed. So this is revenge? You married Lena to get back at me? No. Jameson shook his head. I married Lena because she represents everything you abandoned on your climb to the top. Kindness, integrity, genuine strength. Clayton barked a laugh, though it didn't reach his eyes. Spare me the moralizing. You think you're the first person to come after me with some sad story? I've built an empire while people like your brother and Lena got left behind. That's how the world works. Your empire is built on quicksand, Clayton. Jameson's voice dropped lower. The Westlake deal? The offshore accounts? The manipulated environmental reports? People talk, especially people you've discarded. The color drained from Clayton's face. You don't know what you're talking about. I was an investor for 30 years. I still have friends in every major financial institution in this country. Jameson adjusted his cufflinks calmly. I didn't marry Lena for revenge, but I won't pretend it isn't satisfying to watch you realize who you're actually dealing with. Clayton's hand trembled slightly as he reached for another champagne flute from a passing waiter. What do you want? Money? Nothing. Jameson's smile was gentle but resolute. I have everything I need. Lena and I will leave after dinner and you'll never have to see us again. Then why come at all? Closure, Jameson said simply. For Lena, and perhaps for myself. Clayton stared at Jameson, truly seeing him for the first time. Not just some random man escorting his ex-wife, but someone who had been watching from the shadows, collecting his discarded secrets, patiently waiting for this moment. Enjoy your wedding, Clayton. Jameson nodded politely. I sincerely hope you've changed enough to make Bella happy. As Jameson walked away, Clayton stood frozen beside the ice sculpture. The cold reality washing over him, the man who had just married his ex-wife knew enough to destroy everything he had built. The orchestra transitioned to a slow melody that floated across the ballroom like silk on a gentle breeze. Jameson extended his hand to Lena, his eyes soft with a question. "May I have this dance?" Lena placed her napkin beside her half-eaten wedding cake and slipped her hand into his. "I'd like that." They moved to the center of the dance floor, finding their rhythm among the scattered couples. Jameson's hand rested respectfully at the small of her back, warm and steady. Lena felt none of the pretense that had brought them here, only a surprising comfort in his arms. "Are you all right?" he murmured, his breath stirring the silver strands of hair near her temple. Lena nodded, the simple pearl earrings she wore catching the light. "Better than I expected. Thank you for being here. I should be thanking you." His smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. Not many women would marry a man who appeared on their doorstep with such an unusual proposal. She laughed softly, the sound genuine. Not many men would offer. They swayed together, two people finding balance in unexpected partnership. There was something unrushed in their movements, a gentle consideration that spoke of deeper connection than their brief acquaintance might suggest. At a nearby table, a woman in her 60s dabbed at the corner of her eye with a napkin. "Would you look at that?" she whispered to her husband. "I've known Lena for 20 years. I've never seen her look so peaceful." Her husband nodded. "Carter's a fool for letting her go." Across the room, Bella stood near the gift table, her wedding gown a cascade of designer perfection. Her eyes followed Lena and Jameson's dance, noting the gentle way he guided her through a turn, the quiet laughter they shared over some private comment. Something tightened in her chest, not jealousy, but recognition. She'd never shared such genuine moments with Clayton, despite the diamond on her finger and the lavish wedding surrounding them. When Clayton appeared at her side, champagne in hand and forced smile in place, Bella couldn't tear her gaze from the dancing couple. "They look happy," she said quietly. Clayton snorted. "It's an act. They've been married less than 24 hours. Some people connect instantly." Bella turned to face him, studying his features. "Clayton, I need to ask you something." His smile became fixed. "Today's supposed to be about celebration, not questions. Was everything Lena told me true? About how you left her once you became successful?" Clayton's expression hardened. "She's obviously filled your head with her twisted version of events." She didn't seem bitter, just honest. "Darling?" Clayton touched her cheek with cold fingers. "Lena was never cut out for the life I was building. She chose to stay behind while I moved forward. I offered her plenty in the divorce. She's the one who refused most of it, out of spite." Bella frowned. "That's not what—" "Look at her now," he interrupted, gesturing toward Lena with his champagne glass. "She shows up with some random man she married yesterday. Does that sound like someone making rational decisions? Someone you should trust? But what about the house?" She said. "You—" "Bella," his voice sharpened. "Are you really going to let my bitter ex-wife ruin our wedding day with ancient history? I thought you were stronger than that." Bella fell silent, watching as Lena rested her head briefly against Jameson's shoulder, their dance a picture of quiet dignity. Something about their connection felt real, substantial, everything her elaborate wedding suddenly did not. She looked back at Clayton's handsome, impatient face, and wondered which version of the past was true, and whether she was making the biggest mistake of her life. The band concluded their song to gentle applause. Lena and Jameson returned to their table, her cheeks flushed with something like contentment. She noticed Clayton at the bar, downing his fourth or perhaps fifth glass of whiskey. His eyes locked on hers, burning with barely contained fury. "I think we should consider leaving soon," Jameson whispered, noticing Clayton's attention. Before Lena could respond, Clayton staggered toward the stage. The crowd parted before him, conversations dimming as he grabbed the microphone from its stand with unsteady hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," Clayton's voice boomed through the speakers, slurring slightly. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate my special day." Bella rose from her seat, concern spreading across her face. "But it seems we have another couple to congratulate." Clayton's smile turned vicious as he pointed toward Lena and Jameson. "My ex-wife and her brand new husband, married just yesterday. What a coincidence, right?" A wave of whispers swept through the room. Lena felt her chest tighten as every eye turned toward them. "Don't you all find it interesting that after 15 years alone, Lena suddenly shows up with a husband on my wedding day?" Clayton laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. "Let me tell you what this really is." "Clayton, that's enough," Bella called out, but he ignored her. "This man," Clayton pointed at Jameson, "married my leftover wife out of pity, or maybe vengeance." His voice hardened. "Did you tell her about your failed investment firm, Grant? How you drove your company into the ground while I was building an empire?" Jameson's face remained impassive, but Lena felt his hand tighten around hers. You think I don't know who you are? Clayton continued, swaying slightly. The great Jameson Grant, once respected until he lost everything, now reduced to escorting sad divorcees to fancy parties to make them feel important. The room fell painfully silent. Bella had reached the stage but stopped short of climbing the steps, her expression horrified. And Lena. Clayton's voice dropped to a mock, sympathetic tone. Still so desperate for attention that you'd marry a stranger just to make a scene at my wedding. Pathetic. You were never good enough for me, and everyone here knows it. Lena felt a strange calm settle over her. The humiliation that should have crushed her simply washed away, leaving only clarity. Clayton's words meant to wound revealed only his own brokenness. Jameson started to rise, but Lena gently placed her hand on his arm. No, she whispered. He's not worth it. Tell me, Lena, Clayton called out. Does he know you can't even afford decent clothes without discount store coupons? That you... Clayton, Bella finally intervened, reaching for the microphone. Stop this right now. He pushed her hand away. I'm just making sure everyone sees the truth. Lena stood up calmly, smoothing the fabric of her simple blue dress. Jameson rose beside her, his posture straight with quiet dignity. Without a word, she took his hand and met his eyes with a small, sad smile. They turned together and walked across the ballroom floor. The crowd parted silently, some faces showing embarrassment, others pity, and a few respect. Clayton continued his tirade behind them, his words growing more desperate and slurred, but Lena didn't hear them anymore. She felt Jameson's steady presence beside her, his hand warm in hers. As they walked with measured steps toward the exit, she didn't hurry. She didn't lower her gaze. With each step, Lena held her head high, leaving Clayton's poison behind with every breath. The night air hit Lena's face as they stepped outside, cool and merciful, after the stifling atmosphere of the ballroom. Fairy lights twinkled among the meticulously pruned hedges and rose bushes of the hotel's garden, mocking the darkness spreading inside her chest. Her composure, maintained with such effort in front of Clayton's cruel performance, finally crumbled. Tears welled and spilled down her cheeks, her shoulders beginning to shake with silent sobs. Lena. Jameson guided her to a stone bench partially hidden by an ornamental cherry tree. His arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. Don't give him the satisfaction. It's not, her voice caught. It's not what he said about me. I expected that. She wiped at her tears with trembling fingers. It's the look on those people's faces, the pity. I never wanted to be pitied. Jameson handed her his handkerchief. For several minutes they sat in silence, the distant strains of music from the reception drifting through the night air. I'm sorry, Jameson finally said, looking toward the illuminated windows of the ballroom. This wasn't what I wanted for you. Lena looked up, studying his troubled expression. What did you want? He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on some distant point. I wanted Clayton to face consequences, just once. The admission hung heavy between them. When I saw your invitation, I thought perhaps, you married me to expose Clayton? The realization settled cold and heavy in her stomach. No. Jameson turned to face her fully, his eyes earnest. I married you because I've admired you for months. Your kindness, your strength. But yes, I also saw an opportunity to finally make Clayton answer for his actions. What actions? Lena asked quietly. 8 years ago, Clayton's company acquired the firm where my brother worked. He gutted it for assets, laid off hundreds of employees without severance, including my brother. Jameson's voice tightened. My brother lost everything. His house, his marriage, eventually his will to live. Lena closed her eyes, pain washing over her. He never told me. I've watched Clayton destroy lives for years. When I met you at the Veterans Center, I didn't know who you were at first. But when I learned, he trailed off. You saw your chance. Lena finished for him. I wanted him exposed. I wanted everyone to see the real Clayton Carter. Jameson's shoulders slumped. But instead, he turned it all back on us. On you. Lena stood, wrapping her arms around herself. The fairy lights blurred through her tears, turning the garden into a smear of light and shadow. She'd believed their courthouse marriage had been impulsive but genuine, a connection between two wounded souls. Learning it was partly calculated left her feeling hollow. I need some time. Her voice was barely audible. Lena, please. You used me, Jameson. She turned to face him. Not the way Clayton did. But you still had an agenda. That's not all it was, he said, rising to his feet. What I feel for you is real. She nodded, but stepped back when he reached for her. Maybe. But right now, I can't tell where your feelings end and your need for justice begins. The gravel path crunched beneath her feet as she walked away, her back straight despite the weight pressing down on her heart. Behind her, she could hear Jameson call her name once more, his voice breaking. But she continued walking, past the ornamental pond with its silent koi, through the rose archway, and toward the waiting limousine at the edge of the garden. Alone, inside the ballroom, Bella stood in the center of the dance floor, her wedding gown shimmering under the crystal chandeliers. The music had stopped. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, pretending not to stare at the empty seat where Clayton's ex-wife had been sitting moments ago. Clayton stormed back to the head table, grabbed a champagne flute, and drained it in one gulp. His face was flushed with alcohol and rage. Bella approached him slowly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Clayton, we need to talk." "Not now," he hissed, signaling the band to continue playing. "We have guests." "Yes, now." Her voice was soft but carried a firmness that made several nearby guests turn their heads. Clayton grabbed her elbow and steered her toward a corner. "What is wrong with you? This is our wedding day." "What's wrong with me?" Bella pulled her arm free. "I just watched you publicly humiliate two people who did nothing but show up to an event they were invited to." "They came to embarrass me," Clayton's voice rose. "That woman, she's nothing. A nobody who's bitter I left her behind." Bella's eyes narrowed. "That woman helped build your first company. She worked 3 jobs to put you through business school. That's what she told me." "And you believed her?" Clayton laughed, loud and hollow. "Typical. You're so naive." The music faltered as his voice carried across the room. More guests were watching now, their expressions a mix of discomfort and curiosity. "I believe her because everything she said matches what I've seen in you." Bella stepped back, creating space between them. "The way you talk about your employees, how you treat waiters, the cruel comments about my friends." Clayton's face darkened. "You're making a scene. Is it true you laid off hundreds of people without severance, including Jameson's brother?" "Business is business," Clayton snapped. "Not that you'd understand. What have you ever built? What have you ever sacrificed?" The words hung in the air between them. Bella's face went still, as if something had finally clicked into place. "I was about to sacrifice my life," she said quietly, "for a man who sees people as stepping stones." Clayton grabbed her wrist. "You're embarrassing yourself. We'll discuss this later. Let go of me." Her voice was calm but carried throughout the now silent ballroom. "You little ingrate." Clayton's voice rose to a shout. "After everything I've done for you, I pulled you out of that pathetic life. I made you somebody." Guests gasped. The photographer stopped taking pictures. Bella's mother half rose from her seat. "You didn't make me anybody," Bella said, her voice gaining strength. "You tried to make me into someone who would ignore your cruelty. Someone who would look the other way while you hurt people." Clayton's face contorted with rage. "If you walk away from this wedding, you walk away from everything. The house, the cars, the lifestyle you've gotten so comfortable with." A sad smile crossed Bella's face. "I survived before you, I'll survive after you." With trembling fingers, she reached up and unpinned her veil. The delicate lace floated to the floor between them. "I'm sorry," she announced, turning to face the stunned guests. "There won't be a wedding today. I can't marry a man whose success is built on the pain of others." She slipped the diamond ring from her finger and placed it on the table next to Clayton's empty champagne glass. Then, head held high, she walked down the aisle and out the ballroom doors, leaving behind a shocked silence and a future she no longer wanted. 2 days later, Lena knelt in her small backyard garden, trowel in hand. The morning sun warmed her shoulders as she carefully turned the soil around her lilac bushes. Gardening had always been her refuge, a place where broken things could heal and grow strong again. She patted the earth around a tender new shoot. "There you go, little one. You'll be beautiful by next spring." The creak of her garden gate made her look up. Her mail carrier, Joe, waved from the path. "Morning, Mrs. Carter. Got a letter that wouldn't fit in your box." Lena stood, brushing soil from her knees. "Thank you, Joe. Would you like some lemonade? Just made it fresh." "Can't today. Route's running long." He handed her a cream-colored envelope. "Fancy paper. Must be important." After Joe left, Lena settled on her weathered garden bench and examined the envelope. The handwriting was elegant, unfamiliar. No return address. She slid her finger under the flap and pulled out a folded sheet of matching stationery. "Dear Lena, you don't know me well, but you changed my life. I'm writing to thank you for your honesty at what was supposed to be my wedding day. When we spoke in that side room, you didn't try to poison me against Clayton. You simply shared your truth with kindness and dignity. That conversation gave me the courage to see what was right in front of me. I realized I was about to marry a man who builds himself up by tearing others down. I've left Clayton and am staying with my sister while I figure out my next steps. It's scary starting over at 35, but not as scary as spending my life with someone who sees cruelty as strength. You could have been bitter. You could have wanted revenge. Instead, you showed me what real grace looks like. With deepest gratitude, Bella Hastings. P.S. I hope you and Jameson find happiness together. The way you looked at each other while dancing, that's what I want someday. Lena read the letter twice more, her eyes lingering on the postscript. She and Jameson hadn't spoken since that night in the garden. His admission about wanting revenge had opened a wound she wasn't ready to address. But Bella's words stirred something inside her, a question of whether she was being too quick to judge his motivations. She folded the letter carefully and walked inside. Her kitchen, small but bright with yellow curtains, welcomed her with familiar comfort. She placed the letter on her oak table, running her fingers over its smooth surface. The screen door squeaked, followed by Millie's boisterous entrance. "Delivery service," Millie called out, paper grocery bags clutched to her chest. "I got those peaches you like and that tea you can't find at the corner store." She stopped when she saw Lena's expression. "What's that look about? You okay?" Lena smiled softly, touching the folded letter. "I just heard from Clayton's ex-fiancée now. She called off the wedding after we left." Millie's eyebrows shot up as she set the groceries on the counter. "No kidding. Well, good for her. Saved herself years of heartache." She peered at Lena. "You don't seem as happy about it as I'd expect." "I'm glad she found her strength," Lena said. "But it's got me thinking about Jameson, about second chances." Millie pulled out a chair and sat down. "So you're finally ready to talk about him? Because I've been biting my tongue for 2 whole days, which you know is a miracle for me." Lena laughed, the sound warming the kitchen. "Yes, I think I am." After Millie left, Lena stood at her kitchen window, gazing at the lilacs in her garden. The purple blooms reminded her of the boutonniere Jameson had worn just nights ago when they'd made their hasty vows. She turned the simple gold band on her finger, a courthouse purchase that felt both foreign and somehow right. What kind of marriage starts and ends in the same night, she whispered to herself. The house felt emptier than usual. For years, she'd grown comfortable with solitude, finding peace in the quiet after Clayton's devastating departure. But now the silence felt different, like something was missing. She picked up the phone 3 times that evening, dialing half of Jameson's number before hanging up. What would she even say? That she understood his desire for justice but couldn't be part of a plan built on revenge? Or that beneath her disappointment she couldn't stop thinking about how his eyes had softened when he'd looked at her as they danced? Friday passed, then Saturday. Lena moved through her routines, mechanically working her morning shift at the grocery store, tending her garden, preparing simple meals for one. She'd check her phone, hoping for a message, then set it down with a sigh. "This is ridiculous," she told her reflection Saturday night. "We're legally married, and I don't even know if he regrets it." Sunday morning arrived with gentle sunshine. Lena dressed carefully in her blue floral dress, the one she saved for church and special occasions. She pinned her silver hair neatly and added a touch of lipstick. "Just because your heart is confused doesn't mean you should skip worship," she reminded herself, though she dreaded the curious glances and whispered questions about her sudden marriage and equally sudden separation. When she arrived at First Community Church, the familiar white steeple gleaming against the blue sky, she hesitated before climbing the steps. Mrs. Peterson spotted her immediately. "Lena, we missed you last week. I heard the most extraordinary thing." "Good morning, Mrs. Peterson. Lovely day for worship, isn't it?" Lena gently cut her off with a warm smile, continuing into the sanctuary. The church filled quickly, families and couples finding their usual spots in the wooden pews. Lena slipped into her regular seat, halfway up on the right side. She opened her hymnal, focusing on the familiar words rather than the curious glances. Just before the service began, something pulled at her attention. She turned slightly, looking toward the back of the church. There he was. Jameson sat alone in the last pew, his tall frame slightly hunched, hands clasped in his lap. He wore the same navy suit he'd worn the night they'd married, his silver hair combed neatly back. He wasn't looking at her, seemed, in fact, to be deliberately avoiding her direction. The organ began playing, and the congregation rose for the opening hymn. Through the entire service, Lena felt his presence like a physical touch. She sang the hymns without really hearing them, prayed the prayers without fully focusing on the words. As the final blessing ended, Lena gathered her purse and Bible. She turned, gathering her courage, and found Jameson's eyes already on her. Neither moved. The congregation flowed around them, chatting and moving toward the doors, but they remained still, locked in a gaze that spoke volumes without a single word. His eyes held questions, regret, and something deeper that made her heart skip. Lena saw longing there, the same emotion she felt swelling in her own chest, a yearning for what might have been, what could still be. She offered the smallest smile. He returned it, just barely, before the crowd shifted and broke their connection. Lena shuffled around her kitchen Monday evening, finding little comfort in her usual routine. The chicken casserole in the oven was too large for one person, but cooking proper meals kept her mind occupied. She'd chopped extra vegetables, measuring ingredients with precision while the radio played softly in the background. The sharp knock at the door startled her. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, heart suddenly racing. She wasn't expecting company. Smoothing her hair, Lena crossed to the front door and peered through the small window. Her breath caught. Jameson stood on her porch, shoulders slightly hunched, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. In his hands, a small bouquet of freshly cut lilacs, the same purple blooms that grew in her garden and that she'd admired since childhood. She opened the door slowly, the evening breeze carrying the sweet scent of the flowers toward her. Lena. His voice held a gentleness that made her throat tighten. I hope I'm not intruding. She shook her head, unable to find words immediately. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than she remembered. These are for you. He extended the lilacs. I remembered you mentioned they were your favorite. They are, she whispered, accepting them. Their fingers brushed, and she felt a small jolt of connection. Thank you. An awkward silence stretched between them. A car passed on the street. Somewhere down the block, children laughed. I've been working up the courage to come by since yesterday at church, Jameson finally said. I wanted to give you space, but I couldn't. He paused, gathering himself. I couldn't let another day go by without talking to you. Lena stepped back from the doorway. Would you like to come in? I actually made enough dinner for two without meaning to. Relief washed over his face. I like that very much. In the kitchen, Lena placed the lilacs in her grandmother's crystal vase, while Jameson stood awkwardly near the table, hands in his pockets. It smells wonderful in here, he said. Just a simple chicken casserole. She checked the oven. It'll be ready in about 10 minutes. Jameson cleared his throat. Lena, before we sit down, I need to say something. She turned to face him, her hand still resting on the counter for support. I was wrong, he said, his voice low and steady. What I did marrying you with revenge in my heart, it was wrong. Not the marrying part, he added quickly. That felt right from the moment I suggested it. But my motives were tangled. Lena nodded slightly, encouraging him to continue. I've spent the last 2 days thinking about why I really asked you to marry me. His eyes held hers, unflinching. Yes, I wanted to see Clayton face consequences, but more than that, I admired you, your grace, your dignity, your kindness. I rushed things because I was afraid of losing the chance to be with you. The timer dinged, breaking the moment. Lena turned to pull the casserole from the oven, using the moment to compose herself. I understand if you want to end things, Jameson continued as she set the steaming dish on a trivet, but I hope you'll give us a chance to start over properly. Lena gestured toward the table. Why don't we sit down? She said softly. I think we have a lot to talk about over dinner. Jameson pulled out her chair first, then settled across from her, his eyes reflecting both hope and genuine remorse. I'd like to explain, Jameson said, taking a deep breath. Yes, part of me wanted closure with Clayton. That's true. His eyes met hers, steady and sincere. But Lena, that wasn't why I asked you to marry me. Lena watched him carefully, her heart racing beneath her calm exterior. She gestured toward the kitchen table. The casserole needs a few minutes. Let's sit. They settled across from each other, the lilacs between them filling the air with their sweet fragrance. Jameson folded his hands on the table, his wedding band catching the light. I've watched you at the Veterans Center for months, he admitted. The way you talk to the old-timers, how you remember their stories, their grandchildren's names, how you slip extra cookies to Mr. Peterson because his sweet tooth is worse than his diabetes. A small smile touched Lena's lips. When the other volunteers complained about the budget cuts, you brought supplies from home without saying a word. Jameson's voice grew softer. You never seek credit or attention. You just give. Those are small things, Lena whispered. No, Jameson shook his head firmly. They're everything. They show who you are. The timer on the oven beeped. Lena rose to silence it, grateful for the moment to compose herself. She pulled the golden-topped casserole from the oven and set it on the stovetop to cool. When she turned back, Jameson had moved to stand near her. The night I proposed, he continued, I'd already fallen in love with your grace, your quiet strength, the way you held yourself with dignity despite everything Clayton put you through. He hesitated, then reached for her hand. not quite touching it. I had two motivations that night, and I'm ashamed that revenge was one of them. But the stronger one, the real one, was that I couldn't bear the thought of you walking into that wedding alone. His voice cracked slightly, and selfishly, I wanted to be the man by your side. Lena studied his face, searching for any hint of deception. She found none. I understand if you want to end this, Jameson said. We can file for an annulment. I'll make it easy. But I want you to know that marrying you was the most honest thing I've done in years. She turned to dish out 2 portions of the casserole, needing the mundane task to ground her swirling emotions. The familiar motions helped calm her racing thoughts. Sit, she finally said, placing the plates on the table. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was good, comforting, and warm like the home around them. Clayton hurt me deeply, Lena finally said, setting down her fork. Not just by leaving, but by making me doubt my own worth for years afterward. Jameson nodded, listening intently. I'm still healing from that, she continued, and now I need to heal from what happened at the wedding too. I understand, Jameson said quietly. Lena took a deep breath. But something real happened between us, Jameson. I felt it at the Veterans Center. I felt it when we danced. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. His skin was warm and slightly rough beneath her fingers. Then let's make this real, she said softly. From today, the hope that bloomed in Jameson's eyes matched the feeling expanding in her chest, something tender and new, but stronger than she expected. The September breeze rustled through the open windows of Lena's small house. No, their house now. 6 weeks had passed since their heart-to-heart at the kitchen table, and with each passing day, something beautiful grew between them. Jameson's reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed the guest list for Sunday's dinner. Did Roger confirm he's coming? That makes 14 if everyone shows. He called this morning. Lena chopped carrots with practiced ease, said he wouldn't miss your pot roast for anything. Their weekly dinners had started small, just Millie and her husband, plus a lonely widower from church. But word spread about the warmth waiting at the Carter Grant home, and now their modest dining room barely contained the gathering of friends, veterans, and neighbors who showed up faithfully each Sunday. We might need to set up the card table again. Jameson rose and wrapped his arms around Lena from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Or build a bigger house. Lena leaned back against him, savoring the solid comfort of his presence. I like this one just fine. At the Veterans Center, they become something of a team. The director had noticed how seamlessly they worked together and assigned them to revamp the recreation area. What started as hanging new curtains turned into refinishing old furniture, painting walls, and creating a space where healing could happen. Did you see Kevin playing chess today? Lena asked, sliding the vegetables into a bowl. First time I've seen him smile since he came to us. He told me he's thinking about going back to school. Jameson released her reluctantly to fetch plates from the cabinet. Said watching us made him believe in second chances again. These moments, simple, everyday exchanges, had stitched together the fabric of their new life. The courthouse marriage certificate had given them legal status, but it was these 1,000 small kindnesses, shared jokes, and tender glances that made them truly husband and wife. After dinner, they settled on the porch swing, watching dusk paint the sky in watercolor hues. Lena's head rested against Jameson's shoulder, their fingers intertwined. I was thinking, she said softly, maybe we should turn the spare room into a proper guest room. Bella mentioned she might visit next month. The same Bella who almost married Clayton. Jameson's surprise was evident in his voice. She's starting over too. Lena squeezed his hand. We've been writing to each other. She's quite different from what I expected. Jameson kissed the top of her head. You have the most generous heart of anyone I've ever known. The following morning brought the first real hint of autumn. Lena woke early, inspired by the golden quality of light streaming through their bedroom window. By the time Jameson returned from his morning walk, she had emptied the hallway closet of several boxes. What's all this? He stepped carefully around the containers. Fall decorations. Lena's eyes sparkled as she opened the nearest box. I haven't put these up in years. It never seemed worth the effort just for me. Throughout the day, their home transformed. Copper-colored garlands draped the mantel. Jewel-toned pillows replaced summer's pastels. A wreath of russet leaves adorned the front door. Jameson found her standing on a chair in the dining room, trying to hang a string of tiny orange lights along the ceiling beam. Hold this end, she directed, stretching to reach the corner. The chair wobbled slightly. Jameson steadied it with one hand while taking the lights with the other. Perfect, she declared, stepping down into his waiting arms. Something about the moment, the warm glow of the lights, the scent of cinnamon from candles she'd lit, the pure joy on her face, made Jameson pull her closer. Lena's laughter bubbled up, echoing through rooms that had once held only silence and regret, now filled with promise and possibility. The autumn chill had settled over their neighborhood as Lena arranged coffee mugs on the kitchen table. Jameson flipped pancakes at the stove, humming off-key to a melody only he seemed to know. The doorbell chimed through their Saturday morning routine. "I'll get it," Lena said, wiping her hands on her apron. Margaret Williams stood on their doorstep, her silver hair perfectly coiffed despite the brisk wind. As Clayton's former executive assistant and now a dear friend to Lena, she navigated the complicated connections between their social circles with remarkable grace. "Hope I'm not interrupting breakfast," Margaret said, accepting Lena's warm hug. "You're just in time." Lena ushered her inside. Jameson makes enough pancakes to feed an army. In the kitchen, Margaret settled at the table while Jameson poured her coffee. The familiar comfort of their home wrapped around them like a well-worn quilt. "I thought you should hear it from me," Margaret said, cupping her hands around the warm mug. "Clayton's company is filing for bankruptcy next week." The kitchen fell silent except for the soft sizzle of pancakes on the griddle. "The lawsuits?" Jameson asked, flipping another golden disc. Margaret nodded. 3 major ones. The SEC investigation uncovered everything: the falsified reports, offshore accounts, investor fraud. His legal team abandoned him when they discovered he'd been lying to them too. Lena sat down slowly. "What about his wedding? And Bella?" "Called off for good. She's in Europe with her mother." Margaret took a sip of coffee. "The society pages are having a field day. Every door in town is suddenly closed to him. People who celebrated at his parties last month won't take his calls now." Jameson set a plate of pancakes in the center of the table. "Can't say I'm surprised." "There's more," Margaret continued. "He's selling the mansion, the cars, everything. The court froze most of his accounts." "Where will he go?" Lena asked. "His sister agreed to let him stay in her guest house in Arizona until things settle." Margaret shook her head. "He called me yesterday, if you can believe it, asking for help finding work contacts. Didn't even apologize for firing me 3 years ago." They ate in thoughtful silence, the weight of Clayton's downfall settling around them. "You know," Jameson said eventually, "there was a time I dreamed of seeing him fall. Thought it would feel like justice." "And now?" Margaret asked. He glanced at Lena. "Now I realize how much better it is to build something good than to wait for someone else's destruction." After breakfast, Margaret left with promises to visit again soon. Lena stood at the kitchen window, watching golden leaves dance across their small backyard. "Are you okay?" Jameson's hand rested gently on her shoulder. "I am." She turned to face him. "It's strange. For years after he left me, I imagined him failing. Thought it might heal something in me if he lost everything the way I did. And now?" Lena closed her eyes for a moment. "Now I just feel sad for him. He's alone. We're not." She moved to the living room window, watching children play across the street, their laughter carrying on the crisp air. Folding her hands, she whispered a simple prayer. "For Clayton?" Jameson asked quietly. "Yes." She reached for his hand. "That he finds what we found, not wealth or status, but peace, real connections." Lena turned away from the window. "But that's enough about Clayton. We have pumpkins to carve for the Veterans Center, remember?" With a gentle squeeze of his hand, she closed the chapter on her past and stepped fully into her present. The Veterans Center dining hall buzzed with laughter and conversation. White tablecloths adorned the tables, and twinkling lights hung from the ceiling, transforming the usually plain space into something magical. Lena and Jameson had spent all day preparing, cooking meals alongside other volunteers, setting up decorations, and welcoming each guest personally. Now, as the meal wound down, Lena stood near the head table, a leather-bound book clutched to her chest. Jameson gently touched her shoulder. "Are you ready?" he asked. Lena nodded, her eyes bright with purpose. The room gradually quieted as Jameson tapped his glass. "My wife has something she'd like to share with you all tonight," he said, his voice warm with pride. Lena stepped forward, her simple blue dress catching the light. "This past year has taught me so much about second chances," she began. "Many of you here know parts of my story, but tonight I wanted to share something special." She placed the scrapbook on the table and opened it. Pages filled with photographs, handwritten notes, and mementos spread before them. "This is my journey," she said, turning the pages slowly. "The hard parts and the beautiful parts." The veterans gathered around as Lena pointed to various items: newspaper clippings of community events, photos from their volunteer work, notes from people they'd helped. "And this," she said, stopping at a page that held a shimmering gold envelope, "was what I once thought would break me." The wedding invitation sat pressed against the page, but across it in neat red lettering was a single word: closure. I kept this not as a reminder of hurt, but as proof that endings can lead to beginnings. Her voice remained steady as she looked up at the circle of faces. Many of you have your own versions of this moments that tested you, pain you survived. An older veteran with weathered hands reached out to touch the page. You've come a long way, Lena. We all have, she replied, turning to the final pages of the book. There were photos of their small courthouse wedding, their first holiday together, and candid shots of them laughing at the veteran's center. This scrapbook isn't finished, Lena said, pointing to several blank pages at the end. There's always more story to write. As the evening drew to a close, Lena and Jameson stood at their front door, bidding farewell to the last few guests. Their modest home glowed with warmth against the cool night air. Thank you for coming, Frank, Lena said, hugging a Vietnam veteran who'd become a close friend. Wouldn't have missed it, Frank replied. Best meal I've had in months. After the final goodbyes, Jameson closed the door and turned to Lena. The house still held the happy echoes of conversation and laughter. You know, he said, taking her hand, when you showed that invitation, I worried it might stir up old pain. Lena squeezed his fingers. That envelope led me to you. How could I regret it now? In the living room, the scrapbook lay open on the coffee table, surrounded by dessert plates and coffee cups. The mess could wait until morning. I like that you left those blank pages, Jameson said, pulling her close. Lena's laughter filled the quiet house. We've got a lot more living to do. Outside, autumn leaves danced in the gentle breeze. But inside, wrapped in each other's arms, they had found their shelter from life's storms, a love built not on grand gestures or revenge, but on kindness, healing, and the quiet joy of starting over. If you enjoyed the story of Lena Carter and Jameson Grant, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.